Guys, welcome to this channel. Today we're going to review Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Sorry it took a while and everything, it's just I've been a little busy this week and stuff isn't going wrong, I guess, but yeah. Not much to say, but let's get started. Alright, what this movie's about, at the beginning, Rocket gets injured, so they have to, and basically dies, and so they have to go find the cure to fix him and all, but they have to go to some other places because they can't fix him. They have to go to the place where he was created practically, and that leads us to dive back into his past and see what really happened there. Now I have the good, and starting with the good, I think this movie really just satisfyingly closed the Guardians character arcs. And by the way, I will spoil some things because it's just easier to talk about the movie like that. Star-Lord, who has been sort of running his entire life, he got captured or taken away when he was like 7 or something. No, he was definitely older. But and then you see that, and then he goes back to his grandpa in the end. And then you have Rocket, who has been sort of running his entire life as well, but for different reasons. Like as you see in the movie, you see he was tortured and just messed with and put back together. And then he's been sort of in resentment for a long time. And then now he sort of overcame it. You have Jax, who was a dad before Guardians, and then he got his daughter and wife got killed, and then he's been kind of this destroyer out for revenge. And then you see in this movie that's all kind of resolved, so now he kind of goes back to being sort of the dad, and he realizes that in the end. Nebula doesn't have much of a character arc. Character arc is mainly an Endgame, I would say, but yeah. There's really those three in particular. Mantis has been sort of this slave for Ego for the longest time, and now she's sort of go off to live her own life, pretty much. And Groot is Groot. So, yeah, all a lot of fun. I think the way they closed out all the character arcs just works very well for me. Another thing, the whole thing with Rocket's backstory, though things with animal cruelty, I'll get into that later, but it was just heartbreaking to see really what actually happened to Rocket. That he was tortured, put back together, threatened of death, and you see how vulnerable he is, and how horrible this high evolutionary guy is. And I think that stuff overall, though it does not quite to my liking for personal reasons, but as a whole, it was just done perfectly. It keeps you there, and unlike most MCU movies these days, it doesn't feel the need to throw a joke or anything. Every once in a while you get a little chuckle and some smiles in some of those scenes, but nothing to where like it feels like overt humor. And he just lets you sit with that, and that's what Gunn did so well here. And in general, the humor is pretty good here. I think it's the least funny of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, but I think that's okay. And overall, just the way that whole thing was done, it was just done really well. Though I found that bunny voice to be kind of annoying, though. Yeah. And just what they did with Rocket as a whole, I think just worked, especially his line where he says, "I'm not running," and it was in the trailer, and it's also in the movie. I think just works perfectly. And then you see him save all these raccoons and realizes that he is a raccoon, which I think is kind of a funny note. You just see him save them because he was like, I was once these guys, and saving them from what he had to go through, essentially. So, yeah. And then you have this high evolutionary character, which he is probably the most evil villain in the MCU. Even someone like Thanos has some sort of remorse, some sort of love, and some sort of, I guess, reason for this. And then you see the high evolutionary. I bet there is a reason, but we don't really know it here. And you see him just doing these horrible things to animals, and he has no remorse for them whatsoever. He just thinks of them as objects. Though not a very fleshed out villain, not the best characterization, but his place in the movie just works because he's this character you want to see destroyed in the most violent possible way that would not go in an MC movie. You want him to get killed by Deadpool or something, I don't know. And yeah, that's when a villain sort of works in this kind of case. And I just thought all of that whole thing worked very well. The action here, I think, is a bit of a step up to the first two. You have that whole tunnel action sequence thing, whatever you want to call it. It is an action sequence. The one where they're going through the organism thing. If you see near the beginning, if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. The opening sequence, or not with Adam Warlock to kick it off, sort of. there's that. There's some overall great action. I want to rewatch it to sort of affirm my thoughts, and I'm gonna try to do it before I rank all the MCU movies. But overall, just a great conclusion to the trilogy, and yeah, it just worked very well for me. Now I have the mixed elements, and the obvious one for me. I feel like there's definitely some apparent animal cruelty here, obviously, and it doesn't turn me away from the movie. I'm not like it just doesn't feel right. Like I ever think about animals in general, especially cute furry creatures, and in this movie there's a lot of it, and it's the only MCU movie that I think has anything like it. So I bet I just don't think it doesn't quite sit right with me, especially coming out of the theater. I was like, oh, that was worse than I was expecting, but it doesn't really. It's just kind of like a bit of an issue. And second thing, I feel like the soundtrack wasn't as good. I don't feel like this is a bad thing because it just didn't really. I mean, it wasn't. I think there are some great songs, in particular No Sleep Till Brooklyn. Not the biggest fan of it, but Dog Days Are Over. That was obviously a big hit. And songs like Since You've Been Gone, I like Rainbow, good band. We Care a Lot by Faith No More. I like it. I'm not the biggest Faith No More fan, but it's pretty good. There's some other good ones. You had a Bruce Springsteen song. You got Creep, the acoustic version by Radiohead, I think. I'm not a big Radiohead fan. I don't know. I feel like it just doesn't. I feel like the soundtracks of the first two in particular were just so like smooth and organic. Here, it feels like we're kind of just trying to force in songs, and it's a lot longer than the first two. And I mean, it's also a longer movie, but still, I think Volume 2 is probably my favorite soundtrack. I think this one's probably my least favorite. There's a lot of songs I'd probably skip, but I think some of the best ones are probably the best of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, like in particular No Sleep Till Brooklyn, but. And obviously, Come and Get Your Love plays in the post-credit scenes, so that's nice. Overall, I think the soundtrack's not bad, but it doesn't feel as organic as the first two. Maybe it's because they are from specific time periods, and here we get a more overall experience here, but I don't know if it fully works. Now we have the bad, and there are two things. First, the movie kind of has to rely on some characters doing some dumb things in the beginning to set some things in motion, like throwing out the spacesuits in that whole scene. What's it called? Drax and Mantis and Nebula not realizing that Quill and Groot were off the ship, seeing them yelling, flying in the background. It does rely on some of those things. It's not a big issue for me because I'm not really thinking about that. I'm more thinking about the characters. And in general, the plot is pretty thin where it's just about trying to save Rocket and then that turns into some other things. But it's more about the characters. And I think in the end, that's what works here. Now we have sort of the high evolutionary characterization. I think his place in the movie works, but as a character, he's just kind of like a loud, shrieking presence, and I just don't think that fits it as well. I think all the Guardians of the Galaxy villains, none of them I feel like are all very good, and I think Ronan might be I think High Evolutionary probably is my favorite, but overall, none of the three of them I feel like are that good, and I just don't like the way they characterized him, but as a whole, I think what he does to characters, and as a whole, I just think he serves a good purpose for the movie, but not as a villain himself, or not as a standalone character. I mean, they weren't really trying to tell a new story. They were trying to finish off a story with the Guardians. Another thing, I feel like the way Gamora was utilized was just kind of odd, where they were trying to, like, reminisce on the past, and then it took, like, 2 seconds to explain what actually was going on. I think it's like, I don't know if Star-Lord knew the whole plan, that they were all time traveling and whatever, and then this is Gamora from 2014. And so they kind of play at that, and then she's just kind of there throughout the movie, just not quite feeling with this family of Guardians, but kind of a minor thing, I guess. I don't know. I thought that was a little odd, but as a whole, I think it works. Final score, to give it a 9.3 out of 10. Yeah, I think that's fine. Overall, I don't think it's my favorite movie of the year at this point. I might take some rewatches before I really fully decide that, but did it, I think, exceed my expectations? I don't know if it exceeded them, but it definitely met them for sure. And overall, I just thought it was a great and satisfying conclusion to our Guardians story. And I hope we see some of them in the future, in particular Rocket, Nebula, our new one, Star-Lord, I hope. But obviously Dave Bautista's now returning to the role as Drax, so unfortunately we're not going to see any more of him. So yeah, as a whole, tell me your thoughts about this one, the comments below. I got future MCU rankings coming. We got MCU trilogies, MCU movies, and MC and Guardians of the Galaxy members ranked. So we got those three, and then review series is I'm gonna eventually get my Scream tier list out or Scream movies ranked. And we got a Mission Impossible review series, which should be starting pretty soon, and Christopher Nolan series, which also be starting soon, and lead up to both their movies. And then we might re-review Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and then Spider-Man stuff for Across the Spider-Verse eventually, and then DCU stuff for The Flash. And then whenever I see Shazam 2, I'll review it. So that's pretty much what's going to go on between now and the end for the pretty much next month and a half on the channel. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment down below. See you guys next time. Adios.